Professor, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Professor, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock, so we need to get started. Have some of the students connected via Zoom. And then I think there's maybe only you today. Oh, okay. So we have a couple of students also in class. So today we're gonna our discussion on the modeling using Arena of manufacturing systems. In today's lab, we're gonna be working on collecting information from our system using variables. And this is gonna be lab 5. And this is the last lab that we're gonna do before our first modeling exam, which is gonna happen the week before spring break. So if you, I haven't heard from some of you yet on projects. So I just want to let you know that if you haven't tell me where you're gonna be doing your project, you're very late at this point. I'm surprised that I haven't received an answer from some of you already. So I'm concerned. So the project is gonna be due in a week. So if you haven't identified a place, I think you're very behind in terms of the project. I would recommend you to find a place and to notify me as soon as possible. There's 3 students that have reported to me. I sent an email with the information on those 3 students. Those 3 systems are already selected, so you cannot use those. So again, if you haven't sent me your information about the system that you're going to be observing, you're behind, you're late, and I need to have that information as soon as possible. So going back into the lab, we are gonna be looking at the variables today. We have looked at these attributes of properties of entities. We have deal with the job type, the arrival times. Also, we started using variables to collect information about the working process in the system, WIP. But today we're gonna start looking at the use of a variable to collect information about profit and money spent in the system. So if you, for example, are dealing with a system in which you have customers and they come to your system and they spend some money, you want to collect that information since you, for example, you want to compute or forecast the daily profit that you would expect based on the type of customers that are arriving, and you want to collect that information, daily profit, for instance, or money spent by your customers, you can do that with the use of a variable. Okay, so remember the difference between a variable and an attribute. An attribute is a property of an entity, and a variable is information representing some system characteristic. Attributes will not change. Variables will change according to the processes that are happening in the system. So the focus on today's lab is on using variables. So we're going to be using, again, going back to representing the profit, collecting information about the revenue for a system. So that will be the focus on today's lab. So as always, remember to save your work. So again, we're going to have this lab as the last one before the first exam on modeling. So you should be starting to look at those labs that you work on already, start preparing for that exam. Because you're only going to have some limited amount of time to work on the exam. So you need to know how to use all this information that we have been explaining from the beginning of the semester. So setting up a working environment, make sure that you save your files. And then from Arena, you can proceed as we have been doing from the beginning of the semester. We talk about the history, so I'm going to skip those slides. Today, in the last lab, we started using these new modules from Arena, basic process and advanced process. So now we are using the create block. We are using this logic, the sysdelay release block, and also the process for combining them. And to assign attributes, we are using the assign block from Arena. And we're going to be using also the assign block to define the variables, as we did for the working process last time. We have the decide block. And then in terms of statistics, we discussed the difference between how it was collected using the blocks and elements and how we collect now the statistics using the record block. So we're going to be using the record block today in a different way. Instead of using the count or using the time interval, we're going to be using an expression. Okay, so I'll show you how that works. And it's all the same. Statistics for multiple replications. Okay, so this is today's example. Okay, so we are going to be looking at a situation in which we have football fans from Texas State that are going to buy tickets. And there are currently 2 booths open with a line for each. And the students ignore the length of the line and join a line according to a 50-50 chance. Students that arrive to the first booth must wait 3 minutes to get their tickets, where students arriving to the second booth must wait 4 minutes. The average amount spent by fans is $80 with a standard deviation of $15. Assuming that the booths are open 8 hours and the students arrive approximately every 2 minutes, I want you to tell me what is the average dollar spent per customer and the average daily revenue. Okay, so let's build this this model. Again, the logic itself is going to be simple, but the statistic piece is what's going to be a little challenging. So that's where we're going to concentrate today. on that statistic collection piece. So let's open Arena. I'm going to be saving this. That 5. And we're going to be using the templates. So let's attach the basic process and the advanced process. And we're going to start our model with the create block. And the example said that they arrive approximately every 2 minutes. So we are going to use an exponential. With arrivals every 2 minutes. And from there, we're going to use an attribute to define the amount of money that is spent by each customer. So the idea is you are going to create an attribute. It's going to assign that number to your entity, and that attribute is going to be carrying the amount of information, or the amount in terms of information for each entity. So let's say this is going to be based on a probability distribution that is given here. The average amount spent by fans is $80 with a standard deviation of 15. So we are going to create this attribute. I'm going to call it a money spent. And I'm going to assign that attribute to the each entity. And that information is going to be extracted from the entity every time is needed. So I'm going to use this assign block, and I'm going to define this attribute. The attribute name is money spent. It's an attribute. And as part of the value, I'm going to build an expression here. Since I'm giving the average, the model is not telling us the specific distribution. We have the average and the standard deviation. So based on that information, I will use a normal distribution to to represent because the normal uses the mean and the standard deviation. So I'm going to click on the normal. The mean is 80. And the standard deviation is 15. So normal, 80, 15. So what's going to happen here, every time an entity is created, it's going to cross through this block, and I'm going to generate a random number based on this probability distribution that follows a normal distribution with an average of 80 and the standard deviation of 15. So it will generate a number around 80 with this variability. And that number, let's say 85, 89, 87, or 75, is going to be assigned to this entity. Okay, and that's going to be representing the amount of money that the person is spending at the booth. So I'm going to save this. So the important thing here is that you can differentiate about the use of attributes and variables. So the attribute, again, is assigned to the entity. The value is not going to change. So once I assign this number, let's say 82, to this entity, the entity is going to carry that value until it's destroyed. For a variable is not assigned to an entity. A variable is just keeping track to some certain number, and that number is changing according to the processes that are happening inside the simulation. So we have the attribute, and now we want to split these two because we have two booths. So it says that it's a 50-50 chance. So 50% will go to one booth and the other half will go to the other booth. So this is going to be the default. We have a decide that is two-way by chance. 50% will go through the true branch. The other 50% will go through the false branch. So we don't have to edit this. Okay, so we are good. And then we're going to represent this booth 1 and booth 2. Student arriving to the second booth must wait 4 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to create two processes, or use two processes representing a booth. And so for the first one, I'm gonna do a cease delay release. And I call this booth 1. And this is going to be constant. Say wait 4 minutes. So I'm going to make this 4 minutes. Right, this 4 minutes for the first one. Oh, it's 3 minutes, and then the second one is 4 minutes. So let me edit that. Three minutes. And then this is seeds delay release. I'm gonna call this booth 2. And this is gonna be minutes, constant at the rate of 3. Any questions so far? So we have 2 booths. I can update the name here and call this booth 1. Booth 1 and booth 2. And now I'm going to be collecting the information. So we want the average dollar spent per customer and the average daily revenue. So I'm going to start with the money spent per customer. So I'm going to connect these two here. This one. So I'm going to connect these two to a record block. And in this record block, I'm going to define an expression. Okay, so far we have used the record block as a counter. Also, we have used it as to collect the time interval. Today, we're going to use it to define an expression. So this thing is going to be looking for an expression. Remember, we call this money spent. Use the right number. Yes, money spent. So this is the attribute name. So we're going to define this as an expression because it's going to call that expression money spent. And basically what it's going to do is every time an entity crosses this block, it's going to call that attribute from the entity, and it's going to know how much that entity paid or how much that entity spent in the system. So tally name, I'm going to call this dollar spent by customer. Dollar spent by customer is the tally. So the tally is going to create this bag. I'm going to call that bag dollar spent by customer. Every time an entity crosses this block, it's going to call that entity attribute, going to get the information, and it's going to put that information into this bag. Right? So we put these 80, 70, 84, all these numbers into this bag. At the end of the simulation, we're going to call that bag and we're going to compute some statistics from that bag. Okay. So that covers the first statistic, average dollar spent by customer or per customer. Now, the second part is asking for the average daily revenue. Okay, so for computing the daily revenue, I need to define a variable. Okay, so I'm going to use an assign block. And in this assign block, I'm going to define a variable. And this variable is going to be like we did for the WIP. It's going to have a name. I'm going to call it, let's call it daily revenue. Daily revenue. And what it's going to do is going to accumulate the amount that is being spent at the booth, on both booths, throughout the day. So the revenue or daily revenue is going to be equal to daily revenue plus the money spent. So at the beginning, this is going to be 0. And then as we move forward throughout the day, this is going to be increasing until we finalize the simulation run. At the end of the simulation, I want to know how much, what is the value of these variables. Yeah, so every time an entity crosses this block, it's going to go and say, give me the attribute, and I'm going to increase my daily revenue by this amount. Then another entity crosses, I'm going to increase by this amount. Another entity crosses, I'm going to increase by this amount. At the end of the simulation, we'll get the total money spent for the day, daily revenue. So in your projects, if you're looking at restaurants, it would be interesting to estimate the money spent and daily revenue by the restaurant or the service system that you're observing. For instance, I'm not expecting you to check on what each customer is buying, right? Like you might not be able to see that information, but you can see the menu and you can see, let's say, if you are observing during the lunch time, you know you can look at the menu for lunch, and you might be able to estimate an average amount in terms of the items that are offered for the lunch, and also a standard deviation of those prices, and then assign a probability distribution for each customer. And then using that information, you should be able to estimate for, let's say, 2-hour period, how much of a daily revenue or or revenue for that time period is obtained by the restaurant. How is that information important? Well, if you tell me you're making this much money, will that justify, let's say, a salary for another? I don't know, can you hire someone else based on that profit? That could be interesting. Maybe you have 3 people working at the restaurant during that time. You know how much money this typically is a minimum wage type of job, so you can estimate how much money you're spending in salaries and then say, okay, whether or not you can incorporate. Let's say you add another, like whatever you're suggesting to improve the operation of the system will increase your profit. So you can have, okay, this is typically how much they're making. If we make this change, that will be able to increase the profit by this much during that time period, because you're avoiding people to leave the queues. You don't want people leaving the queues. If you can serve them quickly, you have more customers. And then look at that difference. And is that additional profit can help you hire someone else? That will be a recommended option for your system. So you can do all those analysis using this type of analysis, using this type of logic. So this is what we have so far. We have a creation. We are assigning the attribute money spent. We're splitting the customers per booth, booth 1 and booth 2. Then we're recording the money spent. Dollars spent by customer, and then we are also collecting the daily revenue. And we can complete this using this post block at the end. You can check your model. Let's save it first. And then we have to define the statistics. I want to define an output for my tally. So let me see here. My tally name is dollars spent by customer. So I'm going to copy this. Then I'm going to go back to statistic. And I'm going to define a TAVG for dollars spent by customer. And this is going to be average money spent by customer. Then I'm going to do another output that is going to average this single number across replication. So it's going to be a TAVG money spent, which is the, I'm sorry, money spent. This is daily revenue. Daily revenue. And this is the average, the name we gave this, average daily revenue. We'll check my model again. Okay, so two statistics, actually two output statistics. These are for generating the output report for all replications. So if we run 10 replications, this output report is going to report the average for all replications across replications. And we had two statistics that we want to report: the average money spent by customer and the average daily revenue. The average money spent by customer is given by the tally that's collecting the information per entity, putting that in a bag. For the daily revenue, we have a variable that is accumulating the totals till the end of the replication. So what this is going to do is going to report a single number at the end of the replication, which is going to include the total or the final value for the daily revenue for that variable. So we're going to have a single value per replication. And this is not a bag of values, it's a single value of that variable. So at the end of each replication, what the model is going to do is going to show you the final value for that variable. What I want to do is I want to take that final value for replication 1, the final value for replication 2, final value for replication 3, up to replication 10, and I want to average those 10 values. Okay, so that's what the TABG daily revenue is doing. It's taking those 10 values for 1 per replication. It is averaging those 10 values. So let's set up our run. So set up. For the report, I'm gonna use assignment. Project parameters. This is lab, for example, 5. And I'm going to uncheck all this. Apply. We're gonna run 10 replications for 8 hours. And the base time units are minutes. Then I'm gonna click apply. And I will run this. Whenever.
Professor, it is showing me also error, the runtime error.
So let's see if I can get mine to show the error. Let's see. Run. No animation. Okay. Error was detected. The simulation time for Henry tally. Okay. So the way we define these daily revenue is creating problems. Yes. So see if we can figure out what's going on. So I think this is the problem. So the TAVG daily revenue, because we have not defined this as a tally. So we just want to report, let's see if this works.
Professor, I still have error, runtime error.
Yes.
Can I share my screen?
Wait a minute.
Oh.
Yes, so I think that was the problem. We were treating that as a tally, and that was not defined as a tally. So you're getting, what about you guys? Are you getting errors? No?
Yeah, I getting error, runtime error. I
Okay.
think I have to do constant 2 minute past create.
Okay, so I'm gonna allow you to share your screen now, Saha.
Okay. Yeah, Professor, this is the error, runtime error. I have here. I have the within 2 minutes. In here in this block, it is showing error.
Yeah, so that's correct. Can you show me the process? You see what you have in units there?
Oh, sorry. I think it will be minutes.
Yes. Yeah, so you are creating these big delays that were basically creating these huge queues, and then you
Still
had
it,
too many
still
entries.
it is. I think it is.
Yeah, you can do, if you see at the top it says batch run, no animation, you can.
Okay.
And then you have a lot of things that you don't need.
So many. I didn't. The entity one PA I don't know what this means.
Yeah, so close the window, go to run, setup, go to uncheck that, yes.
Is the same result, Professor?
Yes, got the same results. So you can stop sharing now.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'll show my results now. Start running. Some difference, small, big. Yeah, that's fine. As long, I mean, as long as the numbers are not too different. The 18,000, almost 19,000. That's very common. Also, your options are getting stuck. Yeah. So you should still be late after the promises. These are ours. Yeah. So I noticed that as a common problem when you transition from the elements and blocks, you didn't have to pay attention to your units. But now that we are using these new modules, when you're defining the processing time, you have to make sure that you assign the right time units. And that's fine. But that's something that you have to pay attention when you're using these new modules. That for the, I think for the create block as well, you have to make sure that you're using the right time units. 10 minutes here. And if you notice, like right away, this is our type of thinking that I want you to develop. If you get an error quickly about exceeding the number of entities in the system, it's because they're getting stuck somewhere, okay? That should tell you, okay, my entities are getting stuck, getting this error, they're not being processed. So typically what's happening, you can have a create block that is generating more entities that you need to. But if your processing, your interarrival time is correct, then I'll go to the resources and check if, for example, your processing times are in hours, then that means that the processing times are going to be very long. So you're creating big queues, and that's going to generate too many entities in the system. The other thing that could happen is maybe you're not defining a release logic. You're just seizing the resource, but you're not releasing the resource. So if you don't release the resource, the first entity is going to occupy this resource. It's not going to let anybody else to use it. Okay, so that's the other thing you can do. You can look at the results. If you're able to get some results and look at the number of entities that are being processed, if you have a small number, you should have a larger number. They're getting stuck somewhere. You can look at the utilization of your resources. Like if they're getting high utilization, you're not getting too many process, but they have a very high utilization for your resources because they're getting an entity and the entity is getting stuck with them. So those are some of the things that you can do. Also, you can run the model with the animation and see if you get I mean, the animation should tell you where they are getting stuck in the system. Like right now, you have those queues on top of boot 1 and boot 2. If you see those queues are getting too big, is because they're not letting entities flow. Okay, good. Any questions about this one? So if there's no questions, I don't want to add more to this. I think this is complicated enough. I want you guys to focus on what we have done till now. Your assignment is to complete the lab 5, but also go back and review all these labs that we have done through the first part of the semester. So you start getting ready and prepare for the exam. Things like logic, I think, will be easier to remember. I mentioned to one of you, and I want to make the announcement, I'm going to let you bring a piece of paper with code, well, not code, but information that you want to remember, like when to use NQ, when to use NR, when to use TAVG, DAVG. You can bring a paper with that information the day of the exam. Um, but if you want to start working on that piece of paper with that information, you can do that. But the exam is going to be here in class, and you're going to be building the model here with me. So I need you to be prepared, because you're going to have an hour and 20 minutes to develop the logic. The sooner you start practicing, what I will do is I'll take lab 1, I will try to build it by myself. Lab 2, I'll try to build it by myself. And if I get stuck, I will go and review the solution and find out what type of mistake I'm making. You don't want to leave that to the day of the exam, because the day of the exam, you get stuck, you don't know how to fix it, might not be able to complete the exam. So you don't want that to happen. You want to face those issues now. You want to make sure that you go through that process now. So when you're faced with those problems the day of the exam, you know what to do. Questions? Yes.
Professor, in the last homework, I have got the grades, but there is saying that I have error in 2 logics, but it is not specifying. So can I show you my homework 3?
You're talking about the lab, or?
Yeah, lab homework 3. Yeah.
We can discuss that offline. If you want to connect during my office hours, we can go through that.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else? I think I posted the solution for that one. So you see, okay, so let's see. Let me open lab 3. So is this one the one you're referring to? Lab 4? Okay. Are you talking about this one, Saha, or is lab 4? Sawasachi?
Yeah, Professor, this one, modeling lab 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the problem with this one?
Can I show my screen, Professor?
Just 1 minute. Let me make sure that I go through this. Okay. Okay, so in this one, you need to make sure that you use the cease delay release in the appropriate order. You will not release, yeah. Okay. Yeah, you can share the screen.
This is your solution and this is my solution.
Yes.
Where was the problem? Actually, I made it because I made 3 separate lines. Is that the main issue?
So you separated the customers by type?
Yeah, type 1, type 1, type 2, and the else.
Okay. And what was the, remember what was the, so why do you have a counter in front of the C's?
Cause we want to know the each type of order we placed. That's the main issue. That's why how many of each type of order is placed and record the 10th number for the 10th day. For that's why I have count instead of, so that I can count the number of orders for the each type.
Okay. And your solution was different numbers?
Let me run. Oh, okay, I think your solution is Professor older version. That's why I can't run.
You have to save it in your machine in order to run it.
I downloaded. Yeah, do I need to save it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I mean, we can discuss this offline
Okay.
because it looks like, I don't know if you were able to find the difference.
Okay. Then I think I will knock you. Let me
Okay.
find it myself.
Yeah, if you have questions about the labs, it'll be easier for me just to sit down with you and look at the details, but I want everybody to behold. Yeah, so you have, so let me see. Anybody else have questions about what we did today? If not, then I'm gonna stop the recording now and I'll talk to you Wednesday.
Okay. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.